You walk around this building, and everyone is so supportive and so excited about what is happening with the Fever. And you
Caitlin Clark fans are losing their minds right now, and honestly, they should be. The Indiana Fever front office just made 3 moves this offseason, ASIN, that look less like team building and more like someone actively trying to limit the best player in women's basketball, Caitlin Clark. And the worst part, Indiana Fever team president Kelly Krauskopf and head coach Stephanie White didn't even try to hide it during their separate interviews. They said it out loud. What they admitted about Clark's role in 2026, combined with what happened during the draft and free agency, paints a picture that's hard to explain away. So, let's go through exactly what went down. Do you think the Indiana Fever front office is intentionally sabotaging Clark? Let me know down in the comments below. This front office don't know how to maneuver. It's just incompetence all around, man. And I feel bad. I feel bad for Caitlin Clark that this is what she's subject to. This type of front office. It is ridiculous. They are a joke. About 2 weeks before the 2026 WNBA draft, Raven Johnson sat down for a media interview and told the world that Caitlin Clark broke her. Not physically, emotionally. She went back to an Iowa versus South Carolina game from years ago and painted herself as someone Clark's competitiveness had genuinely damaged. And that clip spread fast because people knew the draft was coming. And Clark was already on Indiana's roster. So when the Fever walked up to the podium at pick number 10 and called Raven Johnson's name, Clark's fan base didn't just groan. They went into full fury mode, and you can't really blame them. Clark left side. She doesn't even look at her. Waves her hand as if to say, "I don't care about you. I'm not defending you." That's one reason I hate the internet now, because of that situation. Like, I got bashed. I got bullied. I got called all these things that I wasn't, aka like a monkey or this just... I don't know, like it was just things like that, and I just think I wanted to quit basketball at that time, and I wanted to just go in this little bubble of isolation and just be by myself. This wasn't a basketball decision that fans happened to dislike. It was the front office handing a roster spot to a player who had just gone on camera, talking about how Clark hurt her. And Amber Cox's response after the pick was to call it a home run. A home run. That's what Indiana's GM called drafting someone who spent her pre-draft media time describing how Clark affected her emotionally. Now Johnson is a legitimate defensive player. She's genuinely good at disrupting guards and making life difficult on that end, and nobody's pretending otherwise. But she's undersized at 5'9". Her ability to create offense at the WNBA level is a real open question. And Indiana signed Tyasha Harris literally the day before the draft. The Fever already had Clark, Kelsey Mitchell on a Supermax deal, Harris, Sophie Cunningham, and Lexi Hull all locked into the backcourt rotation. So the math going into draft night was already tight. Adding a 6th guard on top of that, one who can't reliably generate her own shot, doesn't open anything up. It closes things down. With the 10th overall pick in the 2026 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever have selected the person that got waved off because they can't shoot. The person that was on the floor as UCLA is putting belt to South Carolina's ass. Raven Johnson. The board at pick 10 wasn't empty either. There were stretch forwards and interior players available who fit exactly the kind of need Indiana had been carrying for 2 seasons. A player who can space the floor from the 4 spot, take pressure off Aaliyah Boston, and give Clark more room to attack downhill. The front office looked past all of them, every single one, to take a guard, a 6th guard, whose biggest recent headline was about how Clark affected her emotionally. CBS Sports and the Indianapolis Star both put out draft grades that were mixed at best on the Johnson pick, and the consistent note from analysts was that her defensive skill is real, but the positional redundancy creates a structural problem. Indiana doesn't have a clean answer for. Some fans tried to be reasonable about it, arguing Johnson could be a useful piece off the bench. And sure, that's possible, but 5 guards already need real minutes, and a 6th is fighting for scraps, and the team still has a front court that needs bodies. I told you guys, this front office is inept. They don't know what they're doing. They're incapable of making sound decisions. They have no foresight. They have no thought. They have no rhyme. They have no reason. They have no idea. They have no clue. They are incapable. They are incompetent. What this actually does to a locker room before training camp even opens is the part that keeps coming back. Yeah, you've got a player who publicly framed Clark as someone who broke her, now sitting in the same space, competing for minutes on a roster where Clark is the centerpiece. Whether Johnson personally meant harm by that interview or not, the Fever front office created that situation by drafting her 10th overall. They didn't stumble into it accidentally because the pick fell to them. They chose it with other players still on the board. Fans started asking almost immediately whether Amber Cox and Kelly Krauskopf actually watched the Johnson interview before draft night, or whether they watched it and decided it didn't matter. Neither answer looks good for the front office, and the draft was only the first problem because what Indiana didn't do in free agency turned the Johnson pick from a bad decision into part of something bigger. Oh my gosh. Amber and Kelly, they're doing such a good job. No, they're incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. Kane Clark, get away from Indiana immediately. Immediately. Aaliyah Boston is genuinely one of the best young bigs in the WNBA. And right now, the Fever are asking her to carry an entire front court by herself while the team stockpiles guards it doesn't have room for. That's not a role Boston signed up for, and it's not one any single player can fill without cracks showing up the moment you hit a team with real interior depth. After the draft, free agency opened up, and there were front court players available who fit exactly what Indiana needed. Tammy Fagbenley, Rebecca Allen, Azora Stevens, players who can space the floor from the 4 spot, take physical pressure off Boston, and give Clark more room to work off the pick and roll. These weren't obscure names buried in some waiver wire. They were real options, and the Fever passed on all of them. So instead of adding a veteran big who could step in and contribute right away, Indiana went into training camp with Boston as the only true center, a group of traditional bigs who don't shoot from the perimeter, and 1 rookie, 8 guards, 3 forwards, 1 center. That's the roster breakdown analysts were looking at heading into training camp. And it's a structure that creates obvious problems fast when you run into a team that punishes you for being small. They are a joke. Another 5'9" guard. It looked like y'all trying to replace Caitlin Clark. It looked like y'all trying to get a bunch of guards to replace what Caitlin Clark can bring. Y'all trying to get 2-3 people that can feel what that one person does. That's what it looks like, man. But you can't tell me that these moves that they have been making is what maximizes Caitlin Clark's potential. You can't tell me that. That rookie is Justine Pat, Indiana's 2nd-round pick out of Vanderbilt. She's 6'4". She can shoot, and those are genuinely good traits. But she's never played a single WNBA minute. And asking a 22-year-old to carry Indiana's floor spacing responsibilities from day one is the kind of gamble that tends to fall apart in May and June when games actually matter. Indiana's front court answer right now is Boston and Pat. And that's it. Yet if you need someone who can stretch a defense to the 3-point line, Boston's shown she can hold her own offensively against finesse bigs. But drop her into a matchup against bruising physical interior players, and the math gets uncomfortable fast. The Fever have struggled against that kind of front court before, and they haven't actually fixed the problem. They've just added a rookie and hoped for the best. The rest of the front court are traditional bigs such as Misha Hines-Allen and Michaela Timpson. When Indiana runs into a Las Vegas or a New York that carries real size and versatility up front, Boston can't guard 2 spots at once. And Pat isn't ready to bail the team out. That's not speculation. It's just what happens when you build a roster with 8 guards and 1 center. Opponents who've done their film work will pack the paint on every half-court set because they know there's nobody out there on the perimeter forcing them to stay honest from the 4 spot. Where's the size at on this team? You got Aaliyah Boston, you got Monique Billings, you got I just blank them. They just signed her. She played with Dallas in Minnesota, and she's a goon. I like her. You got Dantas. That's all the size we have. Like, that's it. The cap space existed to fix this. The new CBA actually gave the Fever flexibility to bring in a veteran big without gutting the core they've built around Clark Boston and Kelsey Mitchell. That flexibility just went unused, and nobody from the front office has explained why in any satisfying way. See, analysts who cover the roster specifically flagged the stretch for need as the thing Indiana had to address this offseason if they wanted Clark's pick-and-roll game to stay as effective as it's been, because without that floor spacer, defenses can collapse and dare Indiana to beat them from inside, which flips the entire offensive structure. Indiana spent its offseason adding a sixth guard and leaving the front court with a rookie and a prayer. The teams that knock you out in the playoffs aren't the ones who surprise you in April. They're the ones who found your roster problems in October and built a game plan around them all winter. Caitlin Clark led the league in assists her rookie year, earned FIBA qualifier MVP by leading that tournament in assists too. Orion pulled defenses so far out of position with her shooting range that teammates were getting open looks they'd never seen before in Indiana uniforms. So naturally, after all of that, Stephanie White's answer heading into 2026 was to put the ball in someone else's hands more often. All I know is this. If we gonna be this small Stephanie White, you better plan on playing Caitlin Clark style running and gunning, because this team don't got the size. This team don't have enough to play slowdown, drag them out physical games nonstop. It's not enough size. It's not enough size to play that way. So, we going small. We better be getting up and down and making these games attract me. It's that simple. I have no idea what this front office is doing, man. This is bad. This is very, very bad. White admitted it directly in a post-draft interview when asked about the new guard depth with Tyasha Harris and Raven Johnson on the roster. She said, "Caitlin is a player who can play on and off the ball. Raven is a point guard that primarily has the ball in her hands. So, it gives us versatility." That's the coach of the Indiana Fever explaining out loud that she drafted a point guard because she wants Clark playing without the ball more. That's not a subtle hint buried in some press conference transcript. White said it plainly, and fans heard every word of it. Clark's entire offensive game runs through her being the initiator. When she's bringing the ball up and making decisions, defenses have to account for her pull-up 3 from 30 feet, which is a shot almost nobody else in the league can credibly threaten from that distance. And that threat alone opens driving lanes for Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham, generates skip passes into Elia Boston in the post, and creates the open catch-and-shoot looks that Lexi Hall and Cunningham were converting at a high rate. That's not a system built around Clark out of favoritism. That's just what happens when you let her run the offense because the math works out in Indiana's favor every single time. According to Steph White, Cece is a small forward who sits in the corner waiting for playmakers to get her the ball. What is Ty Harris? We're going to be the only team with three-point guards on opening day. What about a backup to Aaliyah Boston? No, Chloe. They want to minimize Kaylin and play her off ball at the 2 and even at the 3. Move Clark off the ball and you don't get a more balanced offense. You get an offense that's easier to defend because the player who is forcing 2 defenders to communicate and rotate constantly is now standing in the corner waiting for a pass, and teams can guard that without breaking a sweat. Beat reporters who cover Indiana regularly made this exact point after White's comments dropped, noting that Clark's off-ball game is solid. But it's not what separates her from every other guard in the league. Her on-ball creation is Clark's on-ball usage directly connects to Indiana's offensive efficiency numbers. And that's not a coincidence or a small sample size thing. Reducing that usage to fit a 6th guard into the rotation isn't a strategic upgrade. It's voluntarily making the offense worse to solve a roster problem the front office created by drafting Johnson in the first place. White framed it publicly as taking pressure off Clark and giving Indiana more options. And maybe she genuinely believes that. But you don't take pressure off a player by removing the things she does better than almost anyone in the sport. You take pressure off her by surrounding her with better supporting pieces, which brings it right back to the front court holes nobody filled this offseason. You honestly still don't get what you have in CC. An absolute tragedy. I'm not spending my money on airfare, hotel, and tickets to watch CC play off the ball. I'll just watch it on TV, so when that BS is happening, I'll turn it off if the Johnson pick also reads completely differently. Now that White's explained her philosophy, because if the plan was always to move Clark off the ball, then drafting a point guard to handle initiation duties makes sense as a concept, except Johnson's offensive game at the WNBA level is unproven. So Indiana's answer to who runs the offense when Clark isn't on the ball is a rookie guard whose scoring ability is a genuine question mark at this level. So Indiana enters 2026 with Clark's role reduced, a front court that can't space the floor, and a new ball handler whose offensive ceiling in the pros nobody actually knows yet. Kelly Krauskopf went on record talking about how Clark needs to adapt to the roster and the system, not the other way around. And that's a wild thing to say out loud about a player who single-handedly drove the biggest attendance surge in WNBA history and turned Indiana into a franchise people outside of Indiana actually care about. This wasn't buried in some long interview where you could argue the context got twisted. Krauskopf put it plainly, and the fan base received it plainly. Now, we know the Indiana Fever's front office has been an absolute dumpster fire. An absolute dumpster fire, guys. We all know that they look like they are lost. They have no clue what to do, where to turn, what's going on. President of basketball operations and business operations for the Indiana Fever, Kelly Krauskopf, took to the Quarry & Company podcast. Shout out to them.